We've got another episode of Chatting with the team here at Pixflix Productions. This time, I'll be asking my boss, Adam, about the origins of Pixflix Productions. So, Adam, how did Pixflix Productions start, and what inspired its creation?
All right. It's a question that I think about quite often. I actually think we're coming up to almost 10 years of Pixflix, which is
Wow.
like it's pretty mind-boggling that I've run this business for 10 years, almost. The start of it really started at a point whereas I was finishing up film school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was starting to look for jobs, and really there was no one hiring someone from a film school. It was like there was no experience. Like we had no experience except for making short films, and
Right.
unfortunately, I was going for corporate work. I didn't want to go down the route of films.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't want to go ahead and make movies and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, I love watching them, but I went into film school at, they say, a mature age. So I had a career before this, which I'm sure we can talk about in another episode. So I went in at on film school around, I was like 20, 23, 24. So
it's not I've seen actually older people.
Of course there's older. Yeah, 100% there's older. But the rest of my class were 18 straight out of high school.
Right. Yeah.
So once I finished film school and I was looking for jobs, I didn't want to go down the route of going down TV or movies. So I was looking for work in the corporate business thing.
Right.
And I didn't have any experience except for making short films. And no one in the business world wants to watch a student short film on Asylum or whatever it is that we made. You know what I mean? So I was like, okay, maybe I just start making my own company and do stuff. I actually saw myself more as a director and editor and never as a camera operator.
Interesting.
So during film school, I didn't touch the camera that often unless I had to.
Right.
I was actually more in the director and the editor side.
Right.
That's the side I took. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to get a camera. And then I went down the traditional route of, what can I do to get into filmmaking? And I had just got married.
Right.
And we had a videographer. And I was like, that's what I'll do.
Right.
So Pixflix started out as purely like a wedding filmmaking company first.
Right. And how long were you doing weddings for?
I did weddings for about 7 years.
Okay.
We still do them sporadically right now. So long-winded question, and I'm sure I could talk about the wedding side in another episode if people want, but we stopped doing weddings 2 years ago. About 2 years ago, I think I stopped promoting wedding side of the business.
Yes, I remember that, actually.
Yeah, we still had some trickle weddings, and we still do weddings for friends and stuff like that. But I did wedding filmmaking for about 7 years, and then shifted gear to where we are now. But 7 years of doing that. Do you know what? It was a really good training ground. Filming a wedding, like, there's no redos.
Yeah, yes, that's very true.
You muck up, you're mucked up. You can't redo it again. And trust me, I've had several stories on mocking up, which I can talk about. But like, there's nothing like learning on the fly. And I'm one of those learners. I'm a learner that learns by doing.
Yeah.
Not by reading. It's repetition. It's learning from my mistakes. It's that kind of type of learning.
Yeah.
So yeah, nothing like wedding filmmaking to really kickstart a career in producing content.
Right.
And learning mistakes along the way.
Right. And so, like, what was the event that like, was there like an event that happened that made you say, okay, like, I really want to shift away from weddings?
Well, look, obviously, COVID-19 played a big factor into the wedding industry around the world. When COVID hit, I was in the thick of wedding filmmaking. I was still working for another company as a videographer as well.
Right.
Um, and I really relied on that wedding filmmaking side to, boost our money up really in the family unit. And obviously that impacted a lot. And then after COVID, I I I started to not like it anymore.
Right.
And like I started doing all corporate work and tried to get down that route, the live streaming stuff to try to bring money in during that process of no weddings.
Right.
So I started to really enjoy working with businesses and down that route. And I was trying to then run two different businesses. I separated corporate from weddings. So
Yeah.
originally everything was under one banner of Pixflix Productions, and then I separated Pixflix Productions and Pixflix Wedding Films,
Yeah.
and I had them separately. So I had two different identities. I was trying to run two different websites, two different Instagrams, two different YouTube channels, like all the different things. So trying to run basically two different businesses. So I wasn't really enjoying the wedding side as much. It was becoming a chore. And then for me, like I have young family,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the real turning point for me was we I did three back-to-back weddings at the exact same venue within a week and a half.
Oh.
And they were all the same conditions. They were all rainy and wet. So
Oh.
basically, it was like doing the exact same wedding with different couples. And I just felt creatively stumped. And I was like, I think I'm done.
Right. Yeah. At that point, you're just like, I really want something else other than this.
I think it's a big testament to if you're not enjoying something, don't do it just for the sake of money.
Right. I think a lot of people find themselves in that
Yeah.
slump.
And I think it's also like any businesses out there is when you're looking at a service that you provide, you need to look at, is that service something that I want to do or I love to do?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a service that is also bringing in money? And at the end of the day, we're a business. We need to run. You need to look at your profit and loss, right? So, is this service that I'm doing actually bringing profit in?
Right.
And then the third thing is, am I giving the best experience to those people that are using that service?
Right.
And I found that all three of those things, it wasn't ticking for me. I wasn't enjoying the service. We weren't making good profit on it. And I feel like I was giving a bad service or a disservice to those customers because my focus and my priorities were on other things.
Right.
So it's really important that when you are offering a service to look at those things and go, yes, it's not working. Get rid of.
Right. And that's actually probably like maybe a really good tip for like bosses and employees like all over the place. Just like, if you feel like you're not putting in your best effort anymore, if you feel like you're just going through the motions, maybe it's like time
Yeah.
for like that new direction. So speaking of new direction, when you moved to the corporate side, what was the first big project you worked on?
I think the big thing that I did was invest in live streaming because that became so huge during COVID times. Everything needed to be live streamed. People couldn't go into events; they weren't allowed. There was capacity limits. There was lots of different things. So
Right.
I really invested into gear, understanding live streaming and getting that happening. So
Right.
that was the first, I guess, big thing that I really did was just upskill and learn and put a lot of time and money into that live
Yeah.
streaming, which worked out quite a well. Like, one of the projects we did was a 7-day live stream. And what I mean about 7 days, it wasn't the entire days. It was, there was 7 days of dance concerts that we were live streaming,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
which was huge. It was over a course of 7 days. I think the biggest day was a Saturday where we did like 6 live streams in one day.
That's a lot of work.
So that was it was a big thing because theaters had limits and capacities, and So
Yeah.
how are the people going to do it? Well, you're going to offer a live streaming option. So they were the biggest thing that I kind of did.
Yeah.
I didn't really do anything big in the corporate promotional side early
Right.
on. But yeah, I think investing in that kind of understanding of live streaming and production from that was probably the biggest thing that I kind of did.
That's actually a very interesting thing because it seems to me you really learned how to adapt with the times.
You had to. And I think it's the same with any business. Like, you have to adapt with what's happening, whether it be economy is bad, whether it be, an outbreak of something, whether it be a family situation, whatever it may be, you have to be adaptable in a business.
Yeah.
And, it can be hard. Like,
Yeah.
that was, a lot of businesses shut down during the COVID times. A lot of businesses shutting down at this times right now with the economy how it is.
Yeah.
You just need to be adaptable. And if you can be adaptable, then you can survive.
Yes. Yes. Very true. That's actually a very good advice. Um, so in talking with that, how has Pixflix evolved over the years?
Yeah.
From when you first started and to now.
Like I said, started in the wedding industry and then moving into the corporate game. I actually, when you say how long has Pixflix at the beginning of this chat, you asked how long it's been around for, and I said nearly 10 years. I really kind of think of it in two phases and two different businesses. First phase was the corporate, was a wedding side. That was one phase, and now we're into this new phase. So for me, the evolution of going from one industry to another has been the biggest kind of transition and thing that we've evolved in. And learning and a business model where we're working with businesses is a completely different ball game than working with, wedding side. I kind of like to put it into two categories, like anything in terms of like weddings or birthday parties and anniversaries, those things. I categorize that as personal projects.
Yeah.
So not personal projects to me, but like personable to that person, right?
Right.
It's something that is meaningful for them. It's a life changing thing for them, and then business projects.
Yeah.
So now we only work in that business project world,
Right.
whereas currently I used to work in that personal project world.
Right. Yeah.
So changing and involving the business in that way has been the biggest change.
Yeah.
And the biggest learning curve in that process.
Right. Yeah, that's really good to hear. And with that, with the evolution of Pixflix, what were those challenges you faced along the way, and how did you overcome them?
I think I'm constantly always challenged. Challenged today, I'm challenged yesterday, I'll be challenged tomorrow. I think for me, if I look at the biggest challenges, it's overcoming my own personal fear.
Right. Yes.
I think, we're humans, we get in our heads about things.
Right.
And overcoming those fears is one of the hardest things. And I see some business owners out there that are just so on the ball, and they can just nothing stops them.
Right.
There's no fear. They're just straight determined. Determined probably not the word, because I think determined can be both people. But they just, nothing gets in their way.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not like that.
Right.
I'm a lot more apprehensive.
Right.
And whether that be some trauma from childhood or whatever it may be, who knows? Not saying I had a traumatic childhood. I had a great family. I have a great family. But I let fear get in my way too much.
Right.
Overcoming that fear is something that I'm still trying to overcome, and it's probably the biggest challenge as a business owner.
Right.
In terms of the business, the biggest challenges was moving from weddings to film to corporate, because I had to then look at, okay, well, I'm now moving into a company structure versus a sole trader, and then I had to get systems in place and all those things.
Yeah.
That I always say we never get taught how to be a business owner or how to run a business.
That's actually very true. That's very true.
What is business studies at school? Like, I sure.
It was like just like how to write a resume or something like that. Like what I remember.
Look, I never did business studies, but I do know that they don't teach you how to run a business.
Yeah.
And I really think that should be a section of studying education that in high school, you know.
It really does. It should be.
It should be, because like, how else is the world supposed to move if people aren't going to build businesses?
Exactly.
There's so many things that can get in the way of a business owner or someone owning a business that you had no idea of. You know, I didn't really know what a company versus a sole trader was. I didn't know what a CRM was.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know all these fancy words that people will throw at me. And I'm part of a business networking group that, you know, we sit down, we discuss these kind of things, and it is so good. It is so good to hear what other people and other businesses problems, or if they need help with guidance on a software or whatever it may be. Like, yeah, so challenges personally would be my fear and overcoming that. As a business, it's just, you know, the biggest challenges were to implement all those kind of systems and processes and those kind of things that, you know, I didn't know that I needed.
Yeah. And that's a big thing actually with the education side of it, where it's like, if you want to learn business, it's kind of like you don't really get to learn that in high school or anything, like when you're really young. So if you aspire to be a business owner, it's just like, what do you do with that? And like, how do you fulfill your ambition?
That's it. And unless you grew up in a family of people that own their own business, you're not going to be surrounded by that. You know? Well, the traditional route of people is they leave school, they go to uni, they get a job in an industry.
Yeah.
Most people aren't going to go, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and make a business.
Right.
You know, unless they, you know, were surrounded by that or they had a passion for that, right?
Right.
And, you know, I think it's really important. Like, yes, you can do tertiary education on running a business and stuff like that, but I really do think it needs to be part of the, you know, just the education system from in high school, I reckon.
Yes, indeed. I agree. I think we're both in agreement right there. And so when you make content for businesses, especially within the social media landscape, it's such a fast-paced industry.
Yeah.
So how do you stay motivated in there?
My motivation, or I hope the motivation, you know, that you get as well, is that we are not working based upon ego.
Right.
I feel like there's way too many businesses out there that purely are on about their ego is the most important thing, and what, you know, their outcomes is all about them.
Right.
And that is not my philosophy.
Right.
At the end of the day, what we're producing is for our clients and not for us.
Yeah.
Yes, we want to be prideful of the work. We want to be able to share that work. We want to be able to showcase this is what we've done for this job. You know, of course, we want to be proud of the work we do. But if you're going in there from a place of ego and going, imagine if I was talking to a business owner and I said, this is what you're going to do.
Right.
In that kind of way. Like when we do talk to people, we go, you know, we say, this is what I suggest. Yeah. But it's not like, this is what we're going to do because this is what we do. And if you don't like it how we do it, then I don't care.
Right.
That is, for me, is egotistical.
Right. Yeah. It is.
And social media changes so rapidly. And I think the biggest thing that I try to avoid is all the trendy stuff that is around. And don't get me wrong, there's a time and place for trends and things like that.
Yeah.
But all those trends don't generally work for every business.
Right.
You know, why, different horses for different courses, as they say, right?
Yeah.
Or was different courses for different horses.
I don't
that
remember.
way. I think it's that way around. You know, trends are there because, you know, they're trendy, but
trends come and go.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why it's called a trend.
Yeah.
It's here now, gone tomorrow.
But if you're trying to sell, say you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's a trend going around with an audio or a style of editing that is nothing to relate to what your business is. And then you try to implement that into your business. it's gonna feel disjointed with your audience.
And it's gonna feel like very how do you do kids? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, when you make content on social media, the content should be driven by what your ideal clientele,
Yeah.
what your passion, what you do, and why you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, to answer your question, how do I keep up with the social media stuff? Is look, the more you're on it, the more you're exposed to it. But for me, it's not about keeping up with the social media trends.
Right.
It's more about identifying what our clients need
Right.
and then making the content based upon that.
Right. So, and also basically, our style is collaboration, not a dictatorship, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That should be our slogan. Collaboration, not dictatorship.
That's a tagline.
So I guess the last question I just want to ask is now something about the future. And I guess I would like to ask you, what does the future of Pixflix look like?
So what you're asking me is, do you still have a job?
Yes, please.
Oh, look, the future of Pixflix, business is a roller coaster.
Yeah.
It's up and down, up and down. And as long as we keep on riding that train and that train not being derailed or it stops, that I see this continuing moving forward in better ways. My hopes and ambitions isn't to be a huge media agency.
Right.
And what I mean about that, I don't want to have 25 employees and all this kind of stuff. I don't want that.
Right.
Because I feel that is going to remove the heart and soul of what I want to do and work with our clients.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because the bigger your business is, the bigger the risk there is and the bigger disconnection you have with your clients.
Right.
I feel.
Right.
Like I work with my clients one-on-one, whether it be I'm filming or I'm directing or whatever it may be, right? So the future for me is to continue the same philosophies and things that I want.
Yeah.
Slightly bigger team that we can accommodate more clients.
Yeah.
We can accommodate, better results for our clients as well.
Right.
So the future would just be to keep this growth kind of going. And something that, I've always had in my back of my head is a place where creatives in Western Sydney can come, can utilize resources, hire gear, that kind of stuff. Because, for example, right, if you want to hire a piece of filmmaking gear in Sydney,
Yeah.
and you don't have that gear, and you want to hire it, and you live out Western Sydney or mountains or wherever it may be,
Right.
the only places to hire gear is in the city. And
Yeah. And then you have to trek all the way to
right
the
in the
city.
city, near the airports, like really far away.
So if you need to use your car to get the gear into the stuff, it's gonna be
Oh, it becomes a nightmare. So potentially another thing in my back of head is maybe we make a hiring gear kind of situation where we have some gear where people can hire it and utilize it and things like that too.
right. And
So I want to be able to still continue to work with our clients and get work from them, but also support any kind of creatives in this kind of Western Sydney kind of
Right.
area as well.
and you feel like that will you feel like that's like your way of like giving back to the local
well, of course, this
filmmaking
hiring won't
scene.
be free, so it won't be given back, but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
will
of
be
course.
more kind of like
But you're contributing in an area of like the local Western Sydney filmmaking scene that is like has a hole in it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah. And with that whole like, staying, small and staying focused, it's like we will have like our special niche within, like our own place. Like we know what we want and what we are striving for and just like remaining steadfast in that decision, right?
Yeah.
If you would like to work with us, we have a 15-minute free discovery call where you'll be chatting with Adam about your business and what type of content we can get for you. The link is in the description below, and we'll see you in the next video.